narrative.
We'd been married for 3 years after dating for 2. The early days were passionate and balanced. We both contributed, both cared, both showed up. But things started shifting after the first anniversary. Small changes at first. Fewer home-cooked meals, less interest in our shared life, more demands without reciprocation. I had brushed it off, making excuses for her behavior. Work stress, family issues. I conjured up every possible explanation except the obvious one staring me in the face. I was being used for stability, status, and financial support while receiving less and less in return. That fateful conversation happened after I had worked a 14-hour shift. I came home exhausted to a dark house and no dinner, despite her being home all day. The sink was piled with her dishes from throughout the day. The laundry I had asked her to handle sat untouched. Yet somehow, she had found time to get her nails done and meet friends for lunch. Her social media post confirmed that. When I asked her about the housework we had agreed to share, she rolled her eyes. "I didn't sign up to be a housewife," she said, not looking up from her phone. I reminded her that I wasn't asking for a housewife, just partnership. That's when she dropped the bomb. She wanted the marriage perks without the duties. "What exactly do you think you're contributing to this relationship?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked genuinely surprised at the question. "I'm your wife. My presence should be enough." Then she listed her contributions. She attended company events with me, maintained her appearance, and hadn't cheated, as if fidelity was a special favor rather than a basic expectation of marriage. That night, sleeping on the couch because she had friends over late and I needed rest before another early shift, something broke inside me. Not my heart, my illusion. I realized I had been living in an imbalanced relationship where I gave everything while she took. The next morning, I went to work with a new clarity. I thought about how she spent the money I earned while keeping her own separate. How she enjoyed the house I mostly paid for without contributing to its upkeep. How she leveraged our marriage for social status while treating me as an afterthought. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I just wanted equality, or at the very least, to stop being taken advantage of. If she wanted the perks of marriage without the duties, then perhaps it was time she experienced exactly what she was giving. Nothing. That day, I opened a new spreadsheet at work. At the top, I typed, "Reciprocity Plan." Under it, I began mapping out exactly how I would give her what she was giving me. No more, no less. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation and a desperate attempt to restore balance. Little did she know that her casual dismissal of our marriage vows would trigger a transformation in me that would ultimately reshape both our lives. I was done being the only one investing in our relationship. From now on, she would get exactly what she gave, and I suspected she wouldn't like the reflection. The morning after that eye-opening conversation, I sat in my car before heading into work and made a detailed list of everything my wife had stopped contributing to our marriage. The list was depressingly long. Cooking, cleaning, emotional support, intimate relations, financial contribution to shared expenses, and even basic respect. Yet she expected premium housing, social status as a married woman, access to my health insurance, inclusion on my family vacations, and full use of my credit for major purchases. I decided my first move would be financial. For years, we'd had a joint account where I deposited 80% of my income while she contributed sporadically, claiming her part-time job didn't pay enough. Meanwhile, she maintained a separate personal account I had no access to. When I checked our joint account that morning, I discovered she had withdrawn $700 for shopping just the day before, while claiming we needed to cut back on groceries. That afternoon, I visited the bank and opened my own separate account. I transferred half the joint funds there, leaving her share untouched. I set up my direct deposit to send only a fixed percentage to the joint account, exactly matching the percentage of her income she contributed. The rest would go to my new account. When I returned home that evening, she was waiting with a calculated smile. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, sidling up to me. I was stressed. "You know I appreciate everything you do." Her hand slid down my arm as she mentioned wanting to book a weekend getaway that she clearly expected me to fund entirely. "Sounds nice," I replied neutrally. "Let's split the cost evenly since we both work." Her smile faltered momentarily before she recovered. "You know my job doesn't pay much. I was thinking you could cover it as a gift." The entitlement in her voice was unmistakable now that I was listening for it. I'm cutting back on expenses, I said simply. I updated our banking arrangement today to be more proportional to our incomes. The calculated warmth vanished instantly. You did what? Without discussing it with me first? The irony of her demanding discussions about financial changes when she'd been making withdrawals without consultation for years wasn't lost on me. I'm just matching your approach, I explained calmly. You keep your personal money separate, and now I'll do the same. I'll contribute proportionally to our joint expenses, just as you do. The argument that followed was revealing. She accused me of everything from cruelty to betrayal, yet couldn't articulate why it was acceptable for her to have financial independence while I shouldn't. When she realized I wouldn't budge, she switched tactics, crying and claiming I didn't trust her anymore. Trust is earned through actions, I responded. And your actions show you want independence, not partnership. I'm respecting your choice by doing the same. Over the next week, I continued implementing my reciprocity plan. I cooked meals only for myself, matching her behavior of the past months. I cleaned only my own messes. When she left dishes in the sink, they stayed there until she handled them. I did my own laundry, but not hers. The breaking point came when she needed a ride after her car wouldn't start. For years, I dropped everything to help her with such emergencies. This time, I responded with the same excuse she'd given when I'd asked her to pick me up during a snowstorm. Sorry, I'm in the middle of something important. Can you call a rideshare? Are you serious right now? She texted back. I'm your wife. Yes, I replied. And I'm your husband. I'm just giving you what you give me. That evening, she confronted me directly. What's happened to you? You've changed. Nothing's happened to me, I answered honestly. I've just started to value myself enough to expect reciprocity. I'm matching your investment in this marriage. Nothing more, nothing less. As she stormed off to stay at her friend's place, I felt no satisfaction, only a grim determination to continue the course I'd set. This wasn't about punishment. It was about establishing a precedent for what I would and wouldn't accept in my life. What I didn't expect was how empowering it would feel to finally establish boundaries after years of one-sided compromise. For the first time since our wedding day, I felt like I was standing up for myself. And despite the conflict, that feeling was worth every uncomfortable moment. By the third week of my new approach, the dynamic between us had shifted dramatically. She returned from her friend's place after 2 days, expecting me to have come to my senses. Instead, she found me perfectly content with the new arrangement. The power imbalance that had defined our relationship was dissolving, and she clearly didn't know how to handle it. Her first strategy was to weaponize intimacy. After months of rejecting my advances with excuses about headaches or fatigue, she suddenly appeared in the bedroom wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. When I politely declined, citing the same too tired excuse she'd used countless times, her expression was priceless, a mixture of shock and indignation, as if her attraction alone should command my immediate attention regardless of her previous rejections. Is there someone else? She demanded, immediately jumping to accusations rather than self-reflection. No, I replied honestly. I'm just matching your level of interest. When you start showing consistent desire for intimacy rather than using it as a manipulation tool, I'll respond in kind. This led to her second strategy, involving others in our private matters. The next day, my phone exploded with messages from her family members questioning why I was mistreating her. According to her carefully crafted narrative, I had suddenly become controlling and cold for no reason. She had conveniently omitted the years of imbalance that preceded my change in behavior. Rather than engaging in a public defense, I responded to each message with a simple, I appreciate your concern, but this is between my wife and me. Meanwhile, I documented every manipulation attempt in my growing journal of our interactions, not out of pettiness, but as a reality check for myself when inevitable moments of doubt would creep in. Her third strategy emerged during a dinner with our closest friends, a calculated public performance. She was excessively affectionate, repeatedly mentioning things she'd supposedly done for me, most of which never happened. When our friends asked about our plans for the upcoming holiday weekend, she jumped in. We're thinking of going to the lake house. He works so hard, and I want to treat him. The lake house belonged to my family. The treat would come entirely from my pocket. Our friends nodded approvingly at her apparent generosity. Actually, I interjected calmly. We haven't discussed any plans yet. If you'd like to plan a trip, we should talk about how we'll split the costs. The momentary flash of anger in her eyes was quickly masked with a laugh. "Oh, he's so practical these days," she told our friends, squeezing my arm with fingernails that dug a little too deep. After our friends left, she exploded. "How dare you contradict me in front of them? You made me look bad." "I simply stated the truth," I replied. "If you want to present yourself as generous, make genuinely generous offers that don't rely on my resources." The confrontation escalated until she threw her trump card. "My father always said I deserved a man who would provide everything for me without question. Maybe he was right about you not being good enough." For years, that comparison to some imaginary perfect provider would have cut deep. This time, I simply nodded. "You're entitled to that view, and I'm entitled to expect partnership rather than servitude. If that's not what you want, perhaps we should reconsider this marriage." The suggestion of ending things, coming from me rather than as her manipulative threat, visibly unsettled her. The financial reality of divorce suddenly seemed to dawn on her. Without access to my income, her lifestyle would change dramatically. Her expression shifted from anger to calculation in an instant. "I don't want that," she said, voice softening. "We can work this out." I agreed we could, but only with clear expectations of reciprocity. That night, for the first time in years, she washed the dinner dishes without being asked. It was a small gesture, but it revealed something crucial. She was capable of contributing when properly motivated. The real test came the following weekend when my car needed repairs. For years, I'd handled all vehicle maintenance for both our cars. This time, I took mine to the shop but left hers with its overdue oil change unaddressed. "When are you going to take my car in?" she asked, clearly expecting me to handle it as usual. "I'm not," I replied simply. "I take care of my car, you take care of yours. That's equality." As she struggled to comprehend this new reality where her problems weren't automatically mine to solve, I realized something important. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about saving myself from a lifetime of one-sided sacrifice that would eventually leave me empty. A month into my reciprocity plan, the confrontation I had been anticipating finally happened. It began with a credit card statement that arrived in the mail. $3, $200 charged to our joint credit card, mostly for designer clothing and expensive salon treatments. For years, I had silently absorbed these costs despite our agreement to discuss any purchase over $200. Those days were over. I placed the statement on the kitchen counter and texted her that we needed to discuss it when she got home. She responded with a casual, whatever, that showed she still didn't grasp the fundamental shift in our dynamic. When she arrived home and saw me sitting calmly at the kitchen table with the statement before me, her expression flickered between defiance and calculation. She opted for the approach that had always worked in the past: distraction. "You wouldn't believe the day I've had," she began, launching into a detailed story about workplace drama. I listened politely, waiting for her to finish before quietly redirecting. "About the credit card charges," I said, tapping the statement. "I'll be paying my portion of the shared household expenses. The personal items you purchased will need to come from your account." She froze. "That's not how we've ever done things." "The past arrangement wasn't working for me," I replied calmly. "Just as you decided unilaterally that certain marital duties weren't working for you." Her voice rose immediately. "So this is punishment? For not being your personal chef and maid?" "This isn't punishment," I corrected. "It's consequence. You wanted independence from traditional expectations while maintaining traditional benefits. I'm simply applying that same principle to finances." What followed was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. She accused me of changing the rules mid-game. I pointed out that she had changed them first when she decided marriage was a one-way street of benefits. She claimed I was being petty. I suggested I was being precise, giving exactly what I received. "Do you even love me anymore?" she demanded, tears forming. Tears I had seen before when logic failed and emotional manipulation became her weapon of choice. "I married you because I loved you," I answered truthfully. "But love requires respect to survive, and respect requires reciprocity." The argument escalated until she grabbed her phone and called her father, putting him on speaker with a triumphant look. I recognized the tactic immediately. She was mobilizing her strongest ally, expecting me to back down as I had in previous disagreements. "Daddy, he's refusing to pay the credit card bill," she said, her voice suddenly small and victimized. Her father's gruff voice filled the kitchen. What's the problem here? A real man takes care of his wife's needs without complaining. In the past, I would have acquiesced under this pressure. This time, I spoke directly and confidently. Sir, with respect, a real partnership involves mutual support and contribution. I'm happy to discuss this with my wife, but this is between us. The silence that followed was profound. Her father, unused to being challenged, sputtered before demanding to speak to his daughter alone. She took the call to another room, but I could hear her increasingly agitated voice as her father apparently failed to provide the intervention she had expected. She returned 20 minutes later, face flushed with anger. He says I should consider whether this marriage is working for me. That's a fair question, I agreed. One we should both consider. Is a relationship based on authentic partnership something you actually want? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. The script wasn't playing out as expected. Her usual tactics were failing, and she seemed genuinely unsure how to proceed without them. That night, a surprising shift occurred. Without discussion, she prepared dinner for both of us, something she hadn't done in months. It wasn't a gourmet meal, just pasta with Jared sauce, but the gesture itself spoke volumes. She was testing whether reciprocity could actually work in her favor too. As we ate in relative silence, I realized this wasn't just about correcting an imbalanced relationship anymore. It was about discovering whether there was anything left between us worth salvaging once the manipulations and one-sided expectations were stripped away. The question remained unanswered as we moved around each other in newly cautious orbits, both aware that we had reached a crossroads. Either we would build something authentic from these raw, honest interactions, or we would accept that our marriage had been built on a foundation too shallow to sustain real partnership. What I didn't expect was how this confrontation would catalyze changes in other areas of my life. Standing up to her and her father had awakened something dormant in me, a certainty about my own worth that extended beyond my marriage. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, not the diminished version I had become in accommodating her constant demands. 2 months had passed since I implemented my reciprocity approach, and a fragile new equilibrium had formed between us. She had begun contributing more, not consistently, but noticeably. I responded in kind, matching her efforts precisely. When she cooked, I cleaned. When she showed genuine affection, I reciprocated. The scorekeeping wasn't ideal, but it was revealing what might still be possible between us. Then came the day of the charity gala, an annual event hosted by my company that typically advanced careers and opened networking opportunities. In previous years, she had attended as my supportive spouse, understanding its importance to my professional growth. This year, when I mentioned the date, she casually announced she had already committed to a girls' weekend that coincided with the gala. Can't you reschedule? I asked. This event only happens once a year, and you've known about it for months. Her weekend plans had only materialized the previous week. No, she responded with a shrug. We've already booked everything. Your work events are so boring anyway. Just go by yourself. In the past, I would have accepted this dismissal of something important to me while continuing to prioritize events significant to her. This time, I simply nodded and said, I understand. I'll go alone. Something in my calm acceptance unsettled her. She studied my face, perhaps searching for signs of the resentment she could later exploit. Finding none, she seemed almost disappointed before heading out to meet friends. The night of the gala arrived. I dressed carefully in my best suit, took professional photos alone instead of the usual couple shots, and focused on networking rather than managing her boredom as I typically would. The evening proved unexpectedly productive. Without dividing my attention between work connections and keeping her entertained, I secured a promising lead on a major project. The following weekend was her sister's birthday celebration, an event she had reminded me about repeatedly, emphasizing how important family was to her despite often ignoring commitments important to me. That morning, I informed her I would be unable to attend. What do you mean you're not coming? She demanded, already dressed for the party. My entire family will be there. They're expecting you. A last-minute opportunity came up with the client I met at the gala, I explained. Since work events aren't priorities in our marriage, I assumed family events followed the same flexibility. Her face flushed with anger. That's completely different. This is my family, and the gala was my career. I replied evenly. I'm applying the same priorities you demonstrated. If professional events are optional, Family events are too. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Throughout the day, my phone pinged with increasingly agitated messages from her and eventually her family members, all expressing shock at my absence. I responded politely but firmly to each, explaining I had work commitments, the same excuse she had normalized in our relationship. When she returned that evening, her anger had transformed into something more calculated. "My family thinks you're having an affair," she announced, watching for my reaction. "That's the only explanation they can think of for your behavior lately." I recognized the tactic immediately, creating a false narrative to pressure me back into compliance. "That's an interesting theory," I replied calmly. "Untrue, but interesting. I'm simply prioritizing what gets prioritized in return." Her expression shifted as her strategy failed. Then came her nuclear option, one I had anticipated but hoped she wouldn't choose. "My sister's husband just bought her a new car for her birthday," she stated, eyes fixed on me for reaction. Everyone was talking about how generous he is, how much he values family. The comparison was deliberate, designed to provoke insecurity and competition. "That's nice of him," I replied sincerely. "Different marriages have different arrangements. Ours is based on reciprocity now." She stared at me, seemingly unable to comprehend that her most reliable manipulation tactic no longer worked. Then, without warning, she burst into tears, not the calculated ones I had seen before, but genuine, frustrated sobs. "What happened to us?" she asked between breaths. "You used to do anything for me." The raw honesty of the moment caught me off guard. "I did," I acknowledged. "But it was never enough, because you took it as your due rather than as gifts freely given." Eventually, that breaks something essential. For the first time, she didn't immediately counter with defensiveness. Instead, she sat heavily on the couch, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "So what now? Is this how it's going to be forever? This calculated exchange?" "That depends," I answered honestly. "Reciprocity doesn't have to mean scorekeeping. It can also mean mutual generosity, mutual consideration. But that requires both people choosing it freely." She looked up at me, something new flickering in her expression, something that might have been the first genuine reflection I'd seen from her in years. "I don't know if I know how to do that anymore," she admitted quietly. "Neither do I confessed. "But we could learn, if we both wanted to." The vulnerability of that exchange left something shifted between us. Not healed, but perhaps with the bandage removed so that healing might eventually begin. Whether that potential would materialize remained uncertain as we moved into the most challenging phase of our transformed relationship. The tentative peace established after our honest conversation lasted precisely 3 weeks before the final confrontation arrived. In those weeks, we had existed in an uneasy truce. She made sporadic efforts toward genuine partnership, handling some household responsibilities, contributing to decisions, even initiating intimacy without ulterior motives. I matched her efforts exactly, maintaining the principle of reciprocity while hoping these might be steps toward authentic reconnection. Then came the credit card bill from her weekend trip with friends, $700 charged to our joint account. The charges included luxury spa treatments, expensive dinners, and high-end boutique purchases well beyond our agreed spending limits. What made it worse was finding the statement deliberately hidden beneath a stack of magazines rather than in our usual mail location. When confronted, she initially denied knowing anything about it. When shown the evidence, she switched to justification. "I work hard. I deserve nice things. I agree that everyone deserves rewards for their work," I replied. "But those rewards should align with their contribution and come from their own earnings." Her eyes narrowed. "So you're refusing to pay it?" "I'll cover my half of our shared household expenses as agreed. The personal luxuries are your responsibility." The calculation behind her next move was visible in real time as her expression shifted from anger to a practiced vulnerability. "I can't afford this on my own," she admitted, voice deliberately small. "My job doesn't pay enough." "Then perhaps luxury spa weekends shouldn't be a priority," I suggested. "Or perhaps a better-paying job might be something to consider." She stared at me as if I'd suggested something outrageous rather than the basic financial responsibility most adults navigate daily. Then came the ultimatum I had half expected for months. "If you don't pay this bill in full, I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us. In the past, such a threat would have sent me scrambling to placate her, to preserve a marriage I had invested so much in despite its increasing returns of misery. This time, I felt an unexpected calm. "I understand," I replied simply. "If that's your decision, I'll respect it." My response clearly wasn't what she had anticipated. She backpedaled immediately. "I don't actually want that. I just need you to understand how serious this is." "I do understand," I assured her. "You're saying that unless I fund luxury purchases made without consultation, our marriage isn't viable from your perspective. That clarifies your priorities perfectly." She tried several more emotional appeals, ranging from accusations of cruelty to reminders of how good we used to be together. When these failed, she switched to threats about taking half of everything in a divorce, clearly expecting this financial leverage to force my compliance. "You're absolutely entitled to a fair division of our marital assets," I agreed calmly. "I've already consulted an attorney about equitable distribution based on contribution." The mention of an attorney silenced her momentarily. "You've talked to a lawyer?" "Behind my back. I've prepared for the possibility that reciprocity might not be acceptable to you long-term," I explained. "Just as you prepared for financial independence by maintaining separate accounts throughout our marriage." In the stunned silence that followed, I added gently, "I would prefer to build something authentic with you, but I won't return to an arrangement where I give everything and receive little in return." She left the house without another word. Late that night, she returned and made one final attempt. Seduction as manipulation, the strategy that had resolved countless arguments in the past by bypassing genuine resolution. I declined gently but firmly, explaining that intimacy should be an expression of connection, not a tool for control. The rejection seemed to finally cement the reality of our new dynamic. She packed an overnight bag and announced she would be staying with her sister until you come to your senses. 3 days later, I received divorce papers. My attorney had prepared me for this possibility, and we responded appropriately. When we met for the initial mediation, her confident expression suggested she still expected me to crumble at the last moment, to fear losing her more than I valued my self-respect. Instead, I presented documentation of our separate finances, the imbalanced contributions to household expenses and responsibilities, and a proposal for truly equitable distribution. Her attorney's expression shifted from smugness to concern as he reviewed the records I had meticulously maintained. By the end of that meeting, her demands had reduced dramatically. 6 weeks later, our divorce was finalized with terms that reflected actual contribution rather than the one-sided arrangement she had expected to continue extracting. The last time I saw her was at the final signing. As we prepared to leave, she paused and asked with genuine puzzlement, "Why couldn't you just keep things as they were? It was working fine." "It was working for you," I corrected gently. "A relationship only succeeds when it works for both people." She shook her head as if I'd expressed some incomprehensible philosophy. In that moment, I realized she truly couldn't understand what seemed fundamentally obvious, that partnerships require mutual investment, that love without respect is just exploitation. Walking away from that meeting, I felt no victory, no vindication, only the quiet certitude that comes from aligning your actions with your worth. The marriage that had started with such promise had ended with clear vision. The painful education it provided had transformed me from someone who gave unconditionally, without expectation of reciprocity, to someone who understood that healthy boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. 2 years have passed since then. I've rebuilt my life on a foundation of mutual respect, learning to recognize the early warning signs of one-sided relationships. I've discovered that genuine partnership feels entirely different from the constant strain of imbalance. It feels like freedom, like possibility, like growth. Sometimes I'm asked if I regret the marriage or its end. I don't. Every experience shapes us, and that relationship taught me perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. Giving someone exactly what they give you isn't pettiness. It's the clearest mirror you can hold up to show them how they're choosing to love.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.